Hello and welcome back to another episode. Indeed, welcome to an ongoing heat wave. For the past few weeks, we have been experiencing extremely high temperatures. Well, by UK standards at least. We've been pushing between 27 and 30 degrees Celsius regularly, daily for the past few weeks. And that's hot for the UK, and I understand if you live like near Texas or California or Florida or various other places around the world, Australia or parts of Australia, you'll be like, oh boo-hoo, single tier, 30 degrees Celsius. But you need to remember, we also have essentially 100% humidity throughout the year. So it is just oppressively hot. Like the air is damp, you can't really breathe at night. When you're trying to sleep, so it is hot. It is hot by UK standards, at least. But nonetheless, this morning, I really wanted to share with you some highlights of some recent comic book pickups, and also actually a couple of books as well, which I'm very pleased to have my hands on. But I'll show you those at the end. All of this starts the other day when I was walking through my local department store, supermarket complex type thing, and saw in a shop window 2 Indiana Jones comics. Indiana Jones 1985, August and February, issue number 5 and 11 respectively, and they were both originally 50p when they came out. In fact, actually, I really like on the back of this one, look at that advert for some Spider-Man watches. Isn't that cool? Anyway, I saw these two in a window of a shop called OKL, and I have mentioned OKL in a previous video. They recently opened a sort of experimental shop comic collectible space in that shopping centre, and sadly I couldn't go in and get these immediately. They were in the window, but the shop was closed, and on the sign it simply said, sorry, closed. And it looked like they were going out of business. In fact, some of the stuff was off the wall, being packed up. So I messaged the Facebook page and said, hello, it's me, I come in quite often, can I come in and get those Indiana Jones comics that are in the window? And the guy said, yeah, I'll be in there tomorrow, pop in, and you can, in fact, you can just go through everything and pick out what you want, I'll give you a deal. And I was like, oh, go on then, go ahead. So I went in the next morning, having just been to the dentist, so I was talking a bit, sort of, hello, I've got a very numb tongue. But he didn't hold that against me. And obviously picked up these two, along with some other things that I'll show you in just a second. These two are brilliant though. And unfortunately, he is closing down. He is shutting up shop. But it's not bad news in the sense that this shop has been an experiment. He's paying rent and rates on the shop. He has to be there 6 days a week, and it's simply not the best way of doing business for him. So he did an experiment. He did some sales online. Those sales went really well. He realised if he's in the shop 6 days a week, he can't be at auctions and getting good collectibles and comics to replenish his stock. And on top of that as well, the context of the store wasn't the best. It was next to a charity shop and a butcher's and a vaping shop. And people weren't really walking past expecting to get collectibles, especially in the charity shop context. People would come in and go, is this a charity shop? And then they'd see old toys, even mint in box old toys, and go, well, I'm not going to pay that, because they were thinking, oh, it's second hand, as opposed to it being collectible. So thankfully, it's not the end of the business. He's got other plans. I'll be able to physically visit his new place. Initially storage, but then maybe like a small shop in its own context. So be a little hidden gem, basically, that we'll be able to go and see and get comics from in the future. But initially I was quite concerned, and that's why I went, oh, can I get those Indiana Jones comics before you close down? In addition to Indiana Jones, I quickly spotted this from January 1995, a Mighty Max comic, and I love Mighty Max. In fact, you might be able to see some Mighty Max up on the shelf just there, just about. You can see there they go. And this one is brilliant. It's got all of the Mighty Max staples in there, the owl and the warrior dude, and oh, I love it. So yeah, we were off to a very good start within moments. So fairly quickly I had picked up the comics that had caught my eye in the window. However, I found myself in a comic book store alone with the owner, with a locked door. It was like a lock-in in a pub. Of course I was going to indulge in the other boxes that were now scattered around the floor. And also, I was having a great conversation with the owner, and a little thing that caught my eye was this. It's not everyone's cup of tea. It's quite tatty. Like the paper on the front there is in terrible condition, really. It's all quite dry as well, quite fragile paper. But I loved the artwork. The way that Spider-Man here isn't constructed out of lines. There's no external line out there, no outline to him, and the webbing isn't on his suit. Rather, it's almost like he's been drawn using cross-hatching of colour. I really like that in this Spider-Man and Hulk team up. The artwork inside the comic is black and white, but fairly clean and crisp lines. I appreciate what's going on there. And Hulk, look at the old school Hulk in the comic as well. I like it, it's good. I also quite like the adverts on the back. So yeah, originally 15p from 1981. Not everyone's sort of must-have collectible, but for me, sort of irresistible actually. Next, another oddity I suppose is Stick with the Hulk, a little Seeing Green sticker collection, with all of the stickers intact in fact. So all the stickers on their sheet here, ready to go, I quite like. And as you might expect, inside just a series of scenarios to populate with the stickers. And as part of my ongoing self-challenge to try and actually make use of these things instead of just collecting them, I'm going to use the stickers in the book at some point in the near future. So yeah, that was a little bit of ongoing therapy. I've talked about this in the previous video about how sometimes I struggle to, as it were, break the seal on things like that, or like the origami calendar I had. The idea of just being able to do each origami once instead of keeping the instructions. Oh, that was difficult. But anyway, Seeing Green, stick with the Hulk. I like it. Next, a 100-page comic based on the Maximum Carnage storyline. I know that there's also actually a SNES computer game, I believe. I think it's SNES computer game where basically there's a whole. It's just a Royal Rumble of Spider-Man characters coming out to play, and I want to see what the comic storyline is like. I also like, again, the artwork on the front's quite cool, Spider-Man, but then also a reflection of a different Spider-Man, shall we say, Spider-Man from the future, I believe. Yeah, and again, look, the artwork is brilliant. There's Carnage, looking all carnagey. Nice, clean, crisp lines. And once again, my favourite style of Spider-Man, that sort of 90s artwork. I love it. Now, I did pick up a few more of the 100-page Exploits of Spider-Man large format comics, but this is just the highlights of this particular pickups. And the next little gem, or interesting little gem, was this all new Midnight Tales. I've never heard of this book before, but the cover fascinates me. I love that you have this little demon strapped to a bed here and a demon in the background saying, "I'm his exorcist. It seems he's been possessed by a human." Fascinating. And then also on the back, really oddly, you have this collection of a galaxy of fine jewellery. Weird stuff, but I simply had to pick it up. It looks like there's a couple of different tales going on in here, and well worth a read. Originally this was 10p. I like it. Back in 1975 by the look of it. Next is an edition of Action Comics with a cover that was just irresistible, and it's Superman flying through Metropolis. "My eyes burning! Can't control my actions! I'll wreck Metropolis!" What a fantastic, slightly camp, episodic comic book cover. 12p originally. Again, these comic book prices fascinate me, and again, I think this is going to be an interesting little read. And on the back, look, build the stars of TV's Battlestar Galactica. So a little model advert there. I like it. Next, Conan the Barbarian. A couple of Conan comics. I have always appreciated the different ways that the Conan stories are told, and especially the slightly naff comic book art that's produced around him. I say naff in the best possible way, you know, lots of swords and sorcery, lots of scantily clad women. It's basically exactly what I want from Conan. So a couple of issues of Conan. I simply had to pick these up. Next, there's an Avengers comic, which just fascinates me. It's an Avengers comic, the Avengers versus the Hordes of Nebula for the Life of Star Fox, guest starring Spider-Man. And notice Spider-Man has a little space, I don't know, helmet on, something to help him breathe in outer space. Again, it's just, oh no, there you go, Captain America has one as well, and Thor as well has one. Yeah, again, it's just irresistible. Some of these comic book artwork just demands that you pick up the comic and have a read, and that's surely the whole point of the front cover of any comic. Oh. Now inside this next comic, we've spotted Ed the Duck. Now, Ed the Duck is very special to me. He was on in the early 90s on CBBC, a children's BBC. Here you go.
Hiya, how are you? Hope you're feeling A-OK. Hello, Ed. We're here, all of us indeed. Me, you, the producer, and we've named them the CBBC Posse next door. The CBBC Posse, yeah, man, we're getting down. Are you ready for it, Ed? 1, 2, 3. The right stuff.
So yeah, Ed the Duck is a niche British thing, but Ed the Duck milkshakes, I had no idea that they existed. Anyway, this advert is in a comic for a cartoon that I used to watch most Saturday mornings, and that was Toxic Crusaders. Not as good as, say, Swamp Thing, but kind of similar. I think in my head it sort of filed away in the same place as cartoons like Captain Planet and this kind of thing. So Toxic Crusaders, and also I remember that guy in particular, with because they released toys of these guys, I believe, and I love it. So again, little things that I love and that I wanted to have in my comic collection. So hopefully you've enjoyed those. Now next we move on to a couple of hardback comic books. The first one being a vintage, as it were, from 1983 annual for Star Wars Return of the Jedi. And the reason I picked this up, and the reason I like to try and get hold of books from the time of the Star Wars films, is because this is from a time before really Star Wars had a lore which was sort of franchised and which had to be tied down. So if you look at these spaceships here, they are not A-wings, as it were. What they are is, well, oh no, are they meant to be Y-wings or A-wings? It's hard to tell, but basically this is clearly an artist who's seen stills from the maybe early concept designs and has based his story on that. Luke Skywalker doesn't look like Luke Skywalker. Darth Vader's helmet is slightly out of shape there. And throughout the inside of this story, we have the familiar movie, but told in a way that's quite loose. And this is often the case, even with novelizations and comic adaptations today. They don't quite match up with the finished movie because, well, the movie is being often done or finalized when this sort of artwork is being produced, so it's all released at the same time. So I love getting a little bit of an insight into what kids thought and what kids were seeing, and indeed what Star Wars, the people themselves thought about Star Wars at the time. Another release from Marvel, Grand Dreams, as well. They did the Indiana Jones annuals. They've got a couple down there, and also the Transformers and Mask, I believe, comics and books as well. So I love it. I love these annuals from well, not quite my childhood. I wasn't actually born in 1983, but from that were around as I was growing up. These were the books that were coming into secondhand and that I could get my hands on when I was a kid. So yeah, had to pick that up, definitely. And again, a bargainous price. I mean, that was like 50p, Next we have, this wasn't from OKL, this is from another shop, a book that I had to pick up following watching the Black Panther movie, and that is who is the Black Panther. I quickly looked online at what are the best Black Panther stories to sort of introduce yourself to the character in the comics, and this one came up quite close to the top. And I'm enjoying it. It's not quite what I was looking for in terms of lore about the Black Panther and the world around him. This is actually quite surface level in that sense. It's actually quite similar to the movie, if I'm honest. But I like the artwork inside, and I like the way that they highlight that Wakanda has always been ahead of the curve, as it were. So in the 5th century AD, for example, they had crossbows that they could use to take out their enemies who would try and encroach on their land. And then we get to the Victorian period, when the great grandfather of Claw is trying to encroach on Wakanda from South Africa. And it's very sort of steampunky, but then also Wakanda is again ahead of the curve technologically. So it's a good book. It's a good introduction, and it's one of the magazine collectibles that are released. You know, the hardback volumes that are released with a cardboard and a little booklet or something. Not quite what I was looking for, but I'm glad I have it anyway. Who is the Black Panther? Next, we have a book that I mentioned actually 2 books that I mentioned in my video about art books. 2 books that one that I knew was coming out soon, and another that's been out for a while, but I didn't have the money to get it. And both of them I'm very happy to have now. The first one is The Legend of Zelda Encyclopedia. This thing, I love it, and it's a great way to end that sort of trilogy of the books: the Hyrule Historia, the art and artifacts, and now the encyclopedia. This book is less pleasing for me, at least, than the art and artifacts, but it is very similarly pleasing. You know, this one is a very, very, very close second, but it just covers everything. It is literally the encyclopedia of Zelda. In minute detail. They go through the storylines of the games, they go through every single incarnation of different monsters and items, and so on and so forth. The only downside to this book, though, and the thing that I think disappoints me, the thing that sort of colours this book for me, is the lack of Breath of the Wild. There's no Breath of the Wild in here, and that's a real shame. Given that at the end of our Arts and Artifacts we had a little extended preview of some of the art coming out of the development of Breath of the Wild, it would have been nice to see even an incomplete encyclopedia of that game in here. But maybe they thought that would be too spoilerific for a game that for many people is still very, very much being explored, myself included. I don't know. Either way, it's a great book, a great Zelda encyclopedia, and a must-have if you have the Historia and the Arts and Artifacts. And I love it. Next, we have The Art of Star Wars Force Awakens. Now, this is a book I've wanted for a while, really since Force Awakens came out. And it's a book that I want much more than I do The Art of The Last Jedi, because this book encompasses art from when they were simply spitballing ideas for the new trilogy. You have all sorts of fantastic and fantastical imagery, like there's a statue there that's been, this is an obviously lightsaber scarred face. Destroying Jedi relics was a theme that was with us early on. All this sort of stuff is simply fascinating to me, and as I said in my art books video, I love seeing the dead ends that production teams go down when they're starting to hash out what a film will be. And there's one image in particular in here that I think would have made a wonderful portion of a movie. If I can try and find that. It's also worthwhile saying as well that in here you have, for example, original concept art for characters that are still based roughly on the George Lucas script. So this is Kira and Sam, who would become Rey and Finn in the finished movie. You have this idea of there was the Jedi killer who morphed into eventually Kylo Ren. I appreciate the way that they were seemingly open to almost anything at this point in the design process, including, for example, having to dive down into the ruins of the original Death Star. Oh no, sorry, the second Death Star on Endor. Someone having to dive into the Emperor's old throne room. The idea of the Millennium Falcon going underwater. I'm not sure how that would have been received when the movie came out. I suppose it makes sense. It's a spaceship, so it's got to be hopefully watertight as well. So yeah, again, I like the way that almost anything was on the table. The notion of Anakin as a Force ghost, morphing between Anakin and Darth Vader in the afterlife. A bit of a spit in the eye to the modification of Return of the Jedi by George Lucas, putting Hayden Christensen intact at the end of those 6 movies. But again, it's all potential storytelling pathways and branches, which I adore. I mean, look at this here. So here's an early image for that Jedi Hunter, and they were clearly trying to find a path that was somewhere between Vader and not. So Jedi Killer, new concept amended. The Jedi Killer design was like trying to land a helicopter on a penny. We couldn't be too Vaderish, but we couldn't reference something else too heavily either. So it's the care and attention to detail that went into this before any of the 7, 8 and 9 trilogy had been put to film. The concept designs for BB-8, brilliant. You've got J.J. Abrams' original sort of yellow notepad there with 2 balls showing BB-8 or concept, and then they had to figure out exactly what BB-8 would look like. Something that had the lineage of an astromech droid, but that was based on essentially a football with a head magnetised to the top. And I really love this. A downed Star Destroyer with just about visible in the painting a sort of an army of red lightsaber wielding Force users versus an army of blue and green lightsaber wielding Force users. Presumably in front of some sort of grand temple. It reminds me of Jabba's palace, which in canon was itself a sort of an abbey in the past for a religion. So it's just all these epic potential storylines that they were playing with during the development of Force Awakens are in this book, and this is why I've always wanted to have a copy. So Art of Star Wars Force Awakens, very much welcome on my shelves. And there we go, the highlights of some recent comic book and book pickups. I continue to enjoy getting my hands on the occasional little gem like that, and it's often a balancing act. I don't want to just fill my shelves with stuff just in case I might like it in the future. I tend to respond to things that immediately grab my attention, and that pile definitely did that. Anyway guys, as ever, until next time, do take care. Bye bye.